Okay, perfect. So for this evening's work session, we have the strategic plan update. And then the board of trustees 2026 budget priority discussion. We'll see where that takes us, what we want to do there. Never done anything like this before, so we'll just see how it goes. Bethany
Yes, definitely.
would like to introduce a new town employee to everybody for us.
Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. My name is Stephanie Anderson, and we are so excited that we have hired a new IT manager. He comes here from North Carolina and has already made such an impact on the whole organization, both at the water treatment plant, internally in town. I'm really excited to introduce Alex Diaz to the group.
Good and code.
Happy to be here. See a lot of projects ahead, but I think we'll be able to make a lot of improvement.
Good, dude.
Yeah,
Awesome.
he's-
Glad to have you aboard.
Minimum on the speeches.
Yeah. Where in North Carolina are you from?
Near Pittsburgh, which is near Chapel Hill.
Okay, that's where I grew
Kind
up,
of
Chapel
between the
Hill.
two.
Oh,
Nice. So Alex has gone through and met with all the department heads to hear ideas and concerns and issues that we're aware of. And then they'll start putting together a project list and might have some things included in the 2026 CIP. So, yeah, really excited. Yeah, we had an issue out at the wastewater treatment plant
Wastewater.
treatment plant today that usually would have caused us all kinds of headaches, and he got out there and took care of things right away and back to work. So it's wonderful.
It was fantastic.
It was fantastic. It was definitely fantastic.
awesome. Thank you. And then, Kelly, you're gonna present on the strategic plan.
So within your packet tonight, there is a tracking document of the strategic plan, and it kind of goes through the 4 different pillars that we have. So I'm not going to go through it line by line because I'm assuming you all have looked through that. But for the folks at home here tonight, I'll kind of highlight some of those. So within Grow Responsibly, we are in progress on the Cleveland Avenue construction project. So moving from that 60% design, moving towards 90% right now. And so more to come on that, and there'll likely be a town hall coming up for the community here this summer. So we'll get that planned and coordinated so the public can give some feedback on that. As you all know, that the water treatment plant was completed on time and under budget. So that is significant. That was multiple years. So while it might just be one bullet point here tonight, that's a very large one, very significant to the whole entire team. Another very large lift was the housing needs and affordability assessment was completed with the planning information and the land use code update as well. So that was a very big deal over multiple years that the planning department was able to get completed for the town and work with the state of Colorado, because that was also grant funded to aspects of that. Under ensure strong town operations, the Wilson well house improvements and ADA lift at the municipal service building are both in progress. The air conditioner recharge system is completed and in-house, working with our fleet equipment. And then the vehicle was purchased for the Parks and Recreation Department. And then if you go to cultivate community spaces, so today, in fact, was the big kickoff for the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Trails, and Trails Master Plan. There's a lot, the PROS Master Plan and Community Center Feasibility Study. So that kickoff was held today with a lot of different departments, hosted by Barry Dunn, the consultant that the board was able to hire. So a lot will come on that. Trail replacement is underway, and then that multi-golf, that snag golf, all those things, those are in progress right now too. I know the board talked about that. And then one of the aspects was looking at prospective revenue and resource analysis. So Northland Public Finance completed that work session with the board in April. And then under foster economic vibrancy, the Shop Local campaign will kick off soon. We've been in partnership working on that Main Street mini grant with our Wellington Main Streets program. And so more to come on that, and we'll be launching that and probably doing a direct mailer. And there's a lot of different collateral materials that are being created with that. And then there's been 2 different work sessions that have been hosted with the Chamber and Main Street group. And then the sanitary sewer infrastructure is underway. And we talked about the housing affordability information, so. Does anyone have any direct questions? There's a lot in there, but I don't want to just go line by line. So.
Questions, concerns, comments?
Awesome work, everyone.
Absolutely, absolutely. Question, the business development manager, where are we at on that?
So right now, the draft job description is with Human Resources to go through and make sure we're dotting our i's and crossing our t's, confirming it's the right job title for the job description that's been created. So hopefully that'll be ready to deploy sometime in June, get it out there and start taking in resumes and applications. So hopefully my goal is to have somebody hired and on board by the end of summer, like August-ish.
Beautiful.
So, yes.
Trustees?
Question related to how some of these that have not been started are still in progress. How do the shifts and changes with grant funding at the federal level, how is this impacting what you guys have in progress and what is coming up? That's super important to know for all of the CIP funds that we're going to be looking at. If we need to change trajectory, it would be really great to know what that financial impact is going to be on top of having our kind of generalized revenue for the last 6 months.
Yeah, I think that's something we can talk about tonight as we get into the budget. One area that we should be hearing, I mean, sometime in May, we were told, is for the automated metering infrastructure, the AMI. So we were seeking grant funding for that, just have not heard yet. So that's an area that I don't know if that funding's still available. I do have a reminder on my calendar to reach out next Tuesday, as that's the last week of the month, to ask the program director if it's still happening. But that was something that could be directly impacted. So that's always going to be a concern. There's usually the federal grants are more stable, and just the state of things, it takes a lot of effort to write grants, and when they're not reliable, that's something that's the constant balance of, where do we seek the funding? Because it's going to pull a lot of resources to be able to do that. So, it's difficult at the moment, but we can talk about that more tonight.
I should point out for the AMI specifically, we did budget in the CIP for paying for that fully, so that project can still move forward.
Yeah, and I do remember having that discussion that if it did come down to it, I just didn't know if, just
Curious. Understood, yeah. So are we. We would love to get some final answers on some of those grants that we have out. I know the team has been working on finding out about the Viewpoint Lift Station grant as well. I mean, that was a congressionally funded grant, so trying to find somebody who knows anything about that has been a challenge. I believe that there's a phone call scheduled
Yeah,
with a consultant next week.
Yeah, we've been reaching out for several months, and then it's like that staff person, it's a bounce back, and then there's just been a lot of that back and forth. And so someone did reach out. I asked if they were the project manager for us or the point of contact. They said no, but they did say that they'll take a meeting with us next week. So there's just a lot of things up in the air, which is really hard for a community of our size to not know if the revenue is stable in that way.
Got it. I know that there was a bunch of, I received an email, I'm sure all of us possibly did, that Congressman Boebert released all of the funds for a specific thing. I don't know if we were part of that
Well,
application.
she submitted the, what is that? the
It's like what
15
she recommends.
So what she recommends is, and they can say,
It doesn't mean
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
funded.
Okay.
So that's what the Viewpoint Lift Station, that was a congressionally direct type of grant. And so that was, Hickenlooper was our sponsor on that. So that's moving through, but those are tricky in a lot of ways too, because there's a lot less guardrails on it. So we were a bit reluctant with that funding, just knowing that the hoops that we've been trying to jump through, just to ensure that, because that passed through multiple rounds of Congress, and I mean, those are incredibly difficult. They call it pork. It's your pork spending traditionally. They did bring that back. So we were a little bit reluctant on that one, just not knowing the current state of the funding that we were already granted, essentially.
Got it. Perfect. That's my question.
Anybody else? No? Ready to move on? Perfect. On to the main event this evening.
So this is something new for us, and I'm just trying to get ahead of budget season, to hear from the board about any ideas that you have, policy items you might want to see implemented, projects, just, we want to hear from the board, before we start working on our 2026 budget. I did include in the budget, in the packet, the strategic plan and also the CIP. So you can see what was scheduled for 2026. Of course, some of those are multi-year items, so anything that was started in 2025 and it's supposed to go to 26 or 27, we can't take out of the budget. But there's always some wiggle room on other projects that we may have added in there. We don't know what our revenues are, none of that, but this is truly a time for dreaming and your visioning to see what you would like us to include or things like that. I do have staff available here if you have questions about projects or, an idea that you have about to do something, like Rebecca may say, I'd like to have 14 new parks next year. And Billy could say, okay, well, I'm gonna need 12 new staff and, millions of dollars, things like that. So, just to kind of keep things, flowing and things like that. So we'll see how the conversation goes. If we get a lot of ideas brought to us, we might do some sticky notes and things like that to rank things as far as priorities. But really, my goal tonight is to hear from you, to be able to take some items back and then start working on what those budget costs might be, and then we can talk about prioritization. Okay, but we'll see kind of how the night goes. Again, thank you for your time tonight. I know this is new and things, but I would really I'm really excited to hear from you guys.
Trustee Dave?
The first thing that comes to mind is some kind of policy regarding spending associated with disasters or emergencies. That's something I would love to have a focus on. I'm trying to tie it into something within our strategic plan right now. I think it's more of, well, obviously it falls into a lot of categories, growing responsibly among all the other, ensure strong town operations, for example. So that's just policy associated with how we can spend in the case of an emergency, to save lives or property or assets. I also, with that, I think there should be a focus on a comprehensive emergency plan. And then part of that is understanding what else we need to do. Like there was a myriad of lists of things that would be a good idea. So I would love for us to be able to put some effort towards, it's going to take a significant amount of time. That's why I really want to bring this in front of everyone of having a plan, understanding what required resources are necessary or other additional policy changes. This is a very comprehensive project. So, and I don't think it needs to be done by the end of the year necessarily, but I think I would really like a good jump start on it so that we know what to budget for next year. That's kind of why I kind of wanted to put that as a focus in the near future.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that comes to mind. I have many others, but I will pass that one along and then wait to hear from everybody.
So Trustee Daly, would you include a continuity of operations plan in that as
Absolutely.
well? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I really wish everybody could have heard the conversation that occurred as part of that. And Trustee, where I was going to say the Trustee Lowry. Just understanding how all those pieces fit together and why it's so important to have all those perspectives covered. I mean, of all people, you would understand that. So it's a lot of work to do, a lot of coordination with partners. One of the things that we need as part of this plan is actually a community space where people, if they were doing incident command or bringing together different emergency groups, would actually have space to participate in that emergency plan. And we don't have the space big enough to manage that right now. We just don't have a facility for it. So there are some short-term, long-term, and very big asks that would be part of an emergency plan or continuity plan. Like what happens if MSB goes up in flames? Where does everyone work from? Like what happens, you know? We need to know what those things are and then what needs to happen to make that right in those scenarios. So I don't think I don't even know enough to ask for what we need, but I think we need to start the planning and immediately change some policies and spending.
Awesome.
It's all good.
Trustee Moore.
Yeah, I absolutely second what trustee Daly shared. It was eye-opening being a part of that exercise. We have a lot of really amazing, talented staff, but it's not gonna do any good if we don't know what to do when it's time to act in that type of scenario. So, I think a communication protocol is like low-hanging fruit, and like she said, there's like short-term and long-term goals. But that facility was something that like was brought up, not by us, but by, I don't think it was him. But it was someone in uniform. Just is very important. My biggest ask would be a focus on funding affordable housing efforts for the future. So when looking on page 13 at the acquisition fund, I would like to see that either have the property piece of that include possibilities for affordable housing, or have it be broadened to include that. And I think that an affordable housing trust, a land trust, because we actually do have land, and we have property that could be put into one that the town owns, should it become available. I'd like to see that begin. The Affordable Housing Fund is something that we could start. We could have an affordable housing committee. Golden has done an interesting job of kind of shoring up the future of affordable housing. They have a fund, there's nothing in it at the moment, but it's there should the funds come available. And I think we could look at funding those types of things, a myriad of different ways. Policy is gonna be involved in that at some level. And possibly, I don't know, get creative. I was kind of, if there's a way that we're under in some project, let's say we save on, our $1 million community center, comes in 200,000 under budget. Could we then say we allocate those funds to this fund? Like, I don't know what the possibilities are. But I do think that we need to set ourselves up to be able to move quickly should opportunities arise. And start laying the groundwork so that we have a good foundation for projects and development in the future. And one of the policy things was looking at development fees, perhaps, as a way to take like a percentage to fund the affordable housing initiative. That's my big one. I'll pass it on.
Thank you. Trustee Teets.
I don't have a lot of big asks for this. I see many, many millions of dollars already asked for and requested with CIP stuff. My encouragement would be to greatly evaluate what our budget looks like come half year and see what those revenues look like before really truly we want to do any kind of choice and allocation of additional funding when it comes to where are we gonna get the funding that we have with this stuff right now. Everything's
Do you have any big
changing.
picture dreams?
No, not at this time.
She's going to Florida.
Trustee Wiegand.
I love what we got planned so far. I think, we've got a good vision for the town. I think, we're already working on a lot of things that we really need to prioritize. Water, getting our prices within reasonability, alternative sources. I know we're looking into this. That's gotta be one of the top priorities right now. 10, 20, 30 years down the road for this town to survive, we gotta do something on that. I think that's extremely important. But again, I think we got a lot of this stuff already in the works. And, I think we just really need to get focused on it and try to get it over the hill at that point. Another thing, I brought up about the business, development manager. That's gonna be an income source for this town, bringing in business. We need to bring in some primary business if possible, not just secondary and third type business. We need to have something that's gonna be a good employer and that people can actually live off of. Menards, okay? Or who knows, or maybe, something, and I think we got a few of those in the process. But after listening to, I think the Berthoud, development manager at that point, he was talking about being so innovative with that. I think there was like a jet propulsion, business that they had brought
Yes.
in. So I mean, something so far out of the box that would just, could put us back, put us on the map
Yep.
at that point.
Absolutely.
But again, I think that's one of the things that we really, really gotta focus on right now too. So, make this town as vibrant as we can get. So.
Ken?
These are all great suggestions, the emergency funds and disaster preparedness. I think about that fire that ripped through just outside of Boulder.
Yeah, Superior and those. stuff.
Yeah, and
That's it.
Or London, Kentucky.
yeah,
Any of that
Yeah.
stuff can happen.
and my military background, I wrote operational plans like that, and it's so we can respond to,
Mhm,
and you have to have those, and you have to practice them
mhm.
before you can actually do anything with it. We're not first responders, we're more in the recovery mode.
Mhm.
But if we've got plans that we can quickly move and quickly offer support and help to our residents, then it's gonna be tremendous for us there. I like your affordable housing plan. I think that's a great idea. You've gotta change your mindset about housing to some degree and about making that a priority before it happens, because otherwise it just doesn't happen. And water was one of the platforms that I ran on, and I'm happy with the progress we're doing. It's a slow process and I think we're gonna get there, but the other program I ran on was economic vibrancy and economic development. Our property taxes and our sale taxes are pretty well balanced. Municipalities should be 2, 3, 4, 5 times the sales taxes than property taxes. We've got a lot of things on this that we approved with this current budget. The Parks Master Plan, concerned about, okay, is it feasible to rec center? Well, we'll never be able to pay for a rec center unless we bring in sales tax revenues to do that. And I like the idea of bringing in a business manager, whether that's the title or whatever that is, but someone who can actually go out there and speak in the streets and making those calls and doing that. But, if we're not setting her or him up for success, then, it's like giving David Justice, go in the battlefield, don't take your gloves. Home rule is a big important thing to me. We passed over it this current year, because of the concerns with the budget and where our spending was. We figured, we thought that around $70,000 or $80,000 might pay for a special election, pay for legal, any kind of marketing that we've got to do to get the word out and so forth. I don't want to see another year go by without us making the move to a home rule. As a home rule community, it's going to give us 3 things. Number one, it gives us more flexibility to work with developers to bring in development. You know, right now our hands are tied by the state, there's only limited things that we can do. Number two, I don't feel like what's coming out of Denver right now. I consider myself a liberal, but then there's too liberal, and quite frankly, some of the things that are coming out, unfunded mandates and, and as a statutory town, we just have to say, yes, sir, just follow along. So as a home rule, we've got some ammunition to fight against that. And the third thing is a sense of pride, we had severance here. Last year, we had great discussions, built good relationships with the severance mayor and their staff and their board. It's also pride. I mean, I'd love to see us as a home rule community. It gives us greater opportunities. As a home rule community, we put in a lodging tax. And the money that comes from the lodging tax can be used for affordable housing. It can also be used for paying for marketing for the town, which could pay for a staff position to do that as well, which offsets money and allows greater resources in the general fund for doing. I think about the long-term viability of this town as we continue to grow and put in more and more houses. And we've been on this road, putting in more houses. We need that commercial infrastructure to support the services that these added residents are going to be demanding. To pay for our roads and the maintenance on the roads. A rec center or a meeting space or wherever that happens, whatever that looks like. I think the home rule gives us a leg up on statutory towns, and it gives us a lot of opportunities to generate those economic opportunities for. So that's my.
Can I say I agree?
Yeah.
And the home rule,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
should be one of the top ones.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my stuff, that's what I was gonna hammer home, glad you did that. The emergency, setting the fund aside, talking about spending, getting emergency preparedness plans, set up where we know which lever means, or whatever happens, then we pass the baton here. What calls us to action here? Who do we reach out when we get to this level? What do we do there? That's all, we did the emergency, management training and went through that, and, yeah, necessity, I think something we definitely plan for, because we don't know when an emergency is gonna happen. We don't know if tornadoes come by here. I mean, that one, the Windsor went right by my place on 3 and 60 back in the day, right? We never know, fires. So yeah, I think that's vitally important. I do like the affordable housing thing. Looking at development fees possibly, they can maybe tie into that. I don't think it's a bad route to go. I want more information to see what the total impact would be to cost of home, things of that nature. And then, yeah, all in on budgeting for home rule to start pursuing that. The longer we take, the longer it'll be before this town ever gets to that point. And for us to run our town correctly, I think we need home rule, because Denver doesn't know what Wellington needs.
Absolutely. So when home rule, what do you think? April election, a year from November? I think we're too close to November. We can get it on this year's ballot, but is that in April 2026 or in November 2026?
I would say
I think April would be great.
You have a lot of trust to rebuild.
it would, but we have a lot of education and
Yeah,
things to get them. I would say November personally. What?
but I mean, April's a year from now, I'm not sure.
I don't think we can think this year.
I mean, I'm talking about next,
To put it on
year
next
from
year.
April.
Let's let staff dig into this a little bit and come up with some plans and come up with some ideas. A calendar, for example,
Yep.
we know that there's 180 days has to go
Mhm.
from the time that you have that
Yes.
first election, that charter commission has got 180 days to put together a charter, then you gotta put it back on the ballot. So it could be 2 special elections in 1 year. It could be a November election next year,
Mhm.
followed up by an April election the year after.
Well, and something to also consider about that is if you get an elected home rule board that starts writing these policies that says they don't want staff involved, because they can choose that. So that's my other concern is that's actually an option where they can say, no, we don't need the legal advice, blah, 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 we're going off of this way. Cause I did a lot of reading about it. So then how do you combat that?
You're talking about the charter commission?
They can make that choice. It's literally labeled in the commission, the charter commission.
Sure.
So then what do you do when you have an entire board of people that say, we don't want the town staff involved at all?
Well, then good luck. I tell them good luck. I mean, it won't be a legal document and that legal review. And it can go before the voters, but it's still up to the.
Well, no, they can
voters to
request
educate
that an
themselves.
attorney be provided that's not the town attorney. That's all in the charter that I've read. That's all in those rules.
Okay, well, we'll take.
So that's what I was
that's
trying
part of the
to-
research. That'll be part of the research we do and, the calendar piece, we can certainly put together and think about what, if we would like to hire, like Magellan or somebody to work on surveying
Yeah.
and getting the information out, how to market it right, and ask the right questions, because they have ways of asking the questions several different ways to get to, what the voter or the resident's actually looking for. And we can look into those options and those issues and see when it has cropped up, if it's happened in the past, how often it's happened, things like that. We can get that information from CML. So,
We have like a ballpark figure of what we were told that might cost, so as you're doing the research,
Yeah.
if you come across that, we can.
absolutely, we can figure that out. I know Superior just took theirs to the ballot just this past year in 2025, so we can probably get some good numbers from them.
Severance budget of 70,000.
Right.
I think that would be the minimum. that we
Yeah,
could
because they didn't
do.
do any outreach.
Well, they were not homeless, they were COVID, right? When
Yeah.
they did theirs, so I
Yeah.
think we have to look at that
Mhm.
difference, and then also, I mean, I know when we talked about it the first time, the education piece was really important to me, so just hammer that home.
Mhm. Yep, and Magellan would do that
Yeah.
if we retain them, so we can get a quote from them and then figure out what the legal and all those.
I know
pieces
this
are.
is a dumb question, but is there any grants available for that?
Not that I know of,
Probably not, no.
Yeah.
because it's more of that, 'cause it's not universal.
Yeah. And I just thought of something too, when you were talking about affordable housing and putting funds aside like that, when I was up in Fraser, we actually created a housing special district. Housing
Yeah,
special
yep,
district,
yep.
Where you can reach partnerships with surrounding communities.
Mhm.
And then it's a contribution of both, and you put a footprint and.
Yep.
And we passed it, I think we used Magellan for
Okay.
some of our research and advertising, it passed. It took 9 months to go from an idea to reality.
Well, and that's what I mean, we're gonna have to be really like creative, innovative, look at things outside of the norm, because building one house at a time isn't gonna do it anymore. Like, I know that there are some people in this room that have big ideas, and I think that's what it's gonna take to make it possible. I did wanna ask if we had ever accessed the CDBG funds,
I don't
community
think so.
block grant.
Yeah, not that I know of.
So
Not here.
as part of that, maybe look at that, for both development and economic development.
Something, the next item I'm going to mention actually ties in, I think it would set up the home rule process better, and not to mention, like, I think it's important for the entire town, and Lowry and I actually talked about this in detail before. But I really think that we need to focus on a branding effort, something associated with Wellington pride, Wellington, just getting people to think about and be proud of where they live. I don't know what the branding would be exactly, but I think that we need to go through a significant branding process in order to have that talk track and then be able to embed that brand within everything that we do. If we already have an established brand, then when we go to the voters and say, let's be Wellington, let's be our own Wellington, like, let's be our own town. I think that is a much easier to sell when you have already established a brand and trust and loyalty. And we talked with Main Street and Chamber about the value of the marketing efforts that they're going through. And they said, well, that only means so much unless you actually do significant efforts for branding behind that marketing. And it's true, that's a business, but that's also building loyalty within any customer or any audience base. And we have so much that we've written into our vision as to what our brand is and like how we see our town. If we could have everybody believe that, or maybe 15% more people believe what we believe in the town, that would make these kind of efforts and just spending money in town in general, or people investing in things in town, so much easier. It's hard to put a number on the return of what that would happen, although it's possible to do that, but
Well, we did tell you.
yeah. But I think it's really, really important.
That's what I asked, what I did in the work session last time about, like, sharing that out and tying it into our vision somehow, like, I just feel like that is so important and it needs to be consistent across the board,
Mhm.
that it's not a shame that that didn't happen in sync with something more universal with the town, but I guess we can use it as inspiration,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and use it in the meantime while we look at something
Yeah.
larger.
There's so much momentum right now.
Mhm.
There's Main Street doing that whole thing to find your, place.
Mhm.
The pros plan is gonna come up with its tagline and vision
Mhm.
independently, right? There's all these efforts that are trying to do the exact same thing in parallel, but we're not really consolidating those efforts or like
Mhm.
living true to that brand. And with all these things happening at the same time, we are missing an opportunity. The high school first graduating class right now, we should have everybody living and dying by Wellington at this point. Wellington proud, Wellington High School, Wellington, 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 Wellington. We cannot let this moment pass us without like capturing all of that. And it's so powerful. I mean, everything we mentioned today would be impacted by that effort. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's something I feel really strongly. And I have another item too, but I'll leave it on that for now.
I think in all honesty, and I'm gonna be very upfront when I say this, there's not a lot of residents you speak to in town that are concerned with any of this right now because they're just trying to survive. They're trying not to see their property taxes increase. They're trying not to see their cost of living increase. So right now, when you look at it, and anyone can correct me if they feel I'm wrong, but in speaking with so many people, right now, they're more worried about how their money's being spent to pay for water than what they are investing so much into a community where they're literally striving to survive, striving to pay their mortgage payments, striving to pay their water bill. This is something that I love the fact that you guys want to bring home rule, but I'm telling you fully and wholeheartedly honesty, you bring this without having open transparency and communication with our water, like what had been suggested with opening the water roundtable meetings. You're gonna create more disdain, you're gonna create more distress because people still won't know what's going on. And that's one thing that was reiterated from the gentleman that came and spoke to us about the exploring how to increase our revenues, is he said, until you have that open, upfront, honest communication, and you're gonna have it. It's gonna have to break all barriers. You're gonna have to be able to shoulder everything someone wants to throw at you because it's going to happen. People are gonna post on social media. They're gonna get mad. They're gonna get angry, but it's gonna be out there and honest. There can't be any more twisting of words when you can literally share a video. This is really literally what's going on. Like, I don't know if I'm just, I see a different crowd of people that are more frustrated with Wellington, or I hear more of that frustration that comes out, but I'm telling you that I don't think that that investment of doing more branding or anything like that is going to change a person's perception of how they feel about Wellington and surviving in Wellington right now. I think that's one of the biggest goals, is decreasing the additional costs at this time and literally reaching out to residents through helping what I had made a suggestion about the HUD grant with extra funding, providing some of that additional funding that we could put in the HUD grant where people could get a certain credit on their bill, every resident. And it was one of those things where I look at the system differently than a lot of people do, because I look at water and I look at that investment, and business can adjust cost of prices depending on what their costs come at. A resident can't change their bills. They can't change what you're charging them. I think that speaking about all of this additional funding and items like this and paying extra for elections and home rule is not something that I think a lot of the residents want to hear right now. They want to hear how they're going to survive to make their next mortgage payment. And I know that we still have to plan as a town, but I think it's a real reality that a lot of people need to get. I drive down my street and I see a handful of houses where people have lived there for years. They're all for sale. Like, people are literally leaving this town. And I know it sucks to say, oh, let's focus on branding and let's do this. You know, that's one thing, but we are losing our residents. And that's something that is one of those things when I say, I look at this and I look at the economic development.
I get it. And I mean, to a certain degree, you're not wrong, but to a certain degree, I personally, in my opinion, view it differently. In this community, yeah, we're gonna be, like, people move out of communities once they get to a certain size or they're different than what it was when they grew up here. So there's kind of a natural turnover rate in that sense, especially in communities around that 8,000 to 15,000 range. Once they start hitting that, people will be leaving to go to the smaller community of what that town used to be, right? Finding the alts, peers, going out to those areas. So that's kind of a natural progression. I would say, there are a lot of residents in town that aren't struggling. We do have the highest median income, also with the highest poverty, so it's, I mean, who's to say which is which, right? But there's a lot of people that aren't. And when we look at issues with the water, most all of that is enterprise fund, highly regulated. We're talking about different buckets here and how we're gonna set up things for the future. And we're talking about dreaming, like, what would be the next best steps for this town for it to progress and move forward? And so that's really the focus of tonight is what here can we focus on for the future? What are our dreams? Let's see if we can make it a reality. We're not making any decisions tonight. We're talking about things that would potentially really benefit this town, and we all understand water, yes, is an issue. We understand that living's not easy for a lot of people right now with, you know, all sorts of different things, not just our water rates, right? And so, but we still gotta be forward thinking, because if we just sit here and focus on just one thing, then we're gonna miss everything else around us, and then Wellington's right back to where it was, you know, 10, 15 years ago.
I think I can illustrate that a little bit.
Can I finish? You.
Oh,
cut
yeah,
me off,
yeah,
and
you're just talking in circles, so I just had to jump in.
all valid and valuable. What I was gonna say is a lot of the stuff that we have lined out with the economic development and items like that have been requested and hopefully planned for a few years now. Those kind of things, I guess my big dream is residents to be able to stay here in their homes and financially afford to be able to continue to stay. So, and I think economic development, when you start there, and affordable housing, when you start there, that's the kind of things that are gonna make some of the biggest difference. So that would be my goal, is to focus on the many, many projects we already have laid out and possibly expand on theirs with like need to, have to basis until this town levels its income, its revenues back out again. That's my
Okay.
goal.
Okay, cool.
Is that? Oh, no, Laura's had her hand up for some time now.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Cannon. I think that clearly we all have different demographics that we interact with more. I think that you do see a different Wellington than some of us. I have several people in my little neighborhood that are new. And I just talked to someone this weekend who's planning on moving here and excited about it. So, I don't know that we can blame every single problem that we have on the water. And I know it's easy to, and I know that happens online, but that's not it. What happened is there was no planning in place. And so what we're trying to do now is use all of the fantastic brains in the room and look at what we can do to set this town up to be very successful in a responsible way over the next several years So that we don't land back into a position where we're flying by the seat of our pants or we're scrambling to fix wrongs that were done 10, 20 years ago. And it's important, and it's important to dream. No one, I'm glad you said it like you did, Mayor, is spending anyone's money at this moment. We're not making decisions, but we are dreaming.
Mhm.
And like, as a town, we would hope that you would do that with us. Because it's important, and we can't realize the vision of Wellington without doing that, period. So tonight's super important. And I would just also like to say, there's a lot of talk about transparency, and that word has many meanings to many different people. But when you're talking about those roundtable discussions, I want to say transparency with the people that signed up to be a part of that is telling them that it's going to be open at some point, because none of them signed up to do that. None of the other roundtables were publicized, none of them were Zoomed or had public. That takes away from the work that's happening in that meeting. It's no longer intimate. It's no longer an honest conversation between people who would outwardly disagree, because the two, it just changes the entire dynamic. And so transparency for one isn't for the other. I mean, we have to consider everybody here. And that's important too.
Some good points. 2018, the board had a similar one of these budget priority sessions. They set two priorities. Economic development was number one. Infrastructure was number two. At the same time, staff and the board was very involved with trying to find new water. And when proposals came before that board during that time period to expand the economic development, because that was a priority for them, essentially they said, no, we need to focus on our water. And that was 7 years ago, and a lot could have happened in those 7 years, because they also had a home rule discussion at that time. No, we can't do that now, we need to focus on our water. There's always things that are urgent right now that keeps you from thinking about what that future looks like. I'm trying to imagine what Wellington will look like in 20 years. I'm trying to imagine what it's gonna look like in 50 years, I don't want us to stay a bedroom community and see businesses on Main Street. And I'm proud of the work that the chamber, the Main Street and the town, the meetings we've had. Shop local doesn't cut it. It doesn't cut it. Yes, it brings pride to our downtown. It gets people aware of that. A lot of people just simply don't shop. So the commercial development will give us the resources that we need to tackle bigger projects down the road and to handle that expanded. And we just can't keep pushing down the road saying, oh, we got more important things to worry about. I'm happy that home rule is going to be part of the budget, for next year, because the consensus seems to be that's important to us here. We can have discussions about branding and other stuff like that. I love the affordable housing. One of the things that I used to do when I held these, we'd do a rank order and say, okay, who gets the most votes? Here's our number one party. There's number two, there's number three, and number four. But I also want to hear, Rebecca, you said you got another project, another idea that you want to talk about too, and I'd love to hear that.
Okay. Yeah, the future of Wellington, I would hope that we all agree, is dependent on building permits. Right, so how much success we'll have will depend on how many actual permits we get in a year, whether it be commercial or residential. I can hear Brian in my head right now because he knows where I'm going with this conversation. You're like, well, now. We need to figure out, and I'm not saying incentives of like cut deals with costs or impact fees. I'm talking about deals that are creative to meet the needs of developers or builders that make sense to meet the goals of what Wellington's trying to accomplish and the timeline, what we want to do. So in that sense, I don't know if we necessarily have the restrictions that we're concerned about for being statutory or whatever the case might be, but I really wanna be able to provide the authority and process to encourage development at the rate in which we are predicting and hoping for, to meet our goals. And to see how to do that by providing policy that makes us nimble and creative when it comes to working with developers. And not making it ever have to come for those kind of aspects that, again, meet our goals, get us on the right track and aligned. Not by throwing money at people, but like other kind of deals. I don't know what they are. I don't even know. You have one. So I just
Yeah.
want, if that's the goal and we need to grow, and we need to grow at a specific rate that we've already determined. I want us to create policy that allows that to happen and allows us to make the deals necessary to get on that track. So I don't even know I don't know what that means. I don't know what that is. All I know is that if that's what we need to do and we're all behind that, then whatever policy that needs to occur to make that actionable, we need to do. So,
Is that like an economic development policy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would be.
Yeah.
Or affordable housing policy. I mean, affordable housing is infrastructure and you can't shop here unless you can live here. So the more affordable your house is, the more disposable income you have to spend at. It's a
I
little
think-
square.
I agree. I think in another work session, I mean, we had the work session, and of course, I was in Africa, but where all the funding sources came out. And there's a lot of ways to get businesses in town without giving up the bank.
Part of that innovation is, I mean, what I was saying, I have it right here, like LIHTC tax credits. Offering developers a 10-year period that they can access the like most tax credits they can reduce their tax liability. It's all for affordable housing, but it gives them that added benefit on top of what they're already receiving. So, I mean, funding stacks and I mean, that's an incentive without being an incentive to participate in that type of project. So,
Or the deals where you tell a business, if they're looking at the property, hey, we could work out a deal where sales tax is this much for this long, and then it stair steps up, or whatever the case may be. But those, we're got our hands tied and some of that stuff, but I mean, those incentives are important. So,
And you gotta have the authority to do that.
yeah.
Right.
Home rule unit.
And home.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm just curious what we can do in advance of that. I just would hate to wait for another, 2 years almost potentially, if we're looking at that timeline.
Yeah.
To really be able to give us the power of doing what we can. So I don't know what is outside that within our, as a statutory town, what we could do, but I think that some type of policy just to enable some more creative solutions, conversations, whatever need to happen to make sure we stay on track from a building permit standpoint is really what's gonna secure everything of the future of Wellington.
That's worthwhile, another discussion.
Yeah.
For sure.
Got a question? We hear from the staff, maybe they have some dreams out there that, they're in the trenches all the time.
This is really about you guys tonight.
Okay,
So we
I
wanted
was
to
just
hear.
curious.
Thank
The
you.
CIP is their dream.
I would pull up our master plans that are in your hymnal on page.
Right, we have that, so we want to hear from you tonight. We haven't done this in the past
Okay.
and.
I'm trying to keep my suggestions vague enough, so it's like, that's what I want, but the geniuses should figure out how to do it.
well, and that's part of it. I mean, I so appreciate you asking that question because when I first started, that's the question that I asked is like, if you had extra time, how would you spend it?
Right.
Like, what project would get
Right.
you excited to
Mhm.
like work on and do? And, I mean, everybody needs that fuel.
Yep.
And so I would put that challenge out and say, knowing kind of the idea of where we want to go,
Mhm.
what creative ways can y'all find and think of, like, be detectives and, get creative and explore all the possibilities and dream big, I mean, no idea is a bad idea.
Well, and I think
we're not gonna vote a bad idea through, so.
we'll be accomplishing some of that through the Postmaster Plan and the
Yeah.
Community Center feasibility study. We're doing our transportation master plan as well. So I mean, there's different things that we're working on this year that will allow us to provide you some ideas for dreams, maybe not this year, potentially the year after. But you know, we're getting there, and a lot of these things are items that have been on our radar, such as the home rule, affordable housing, economic development. You know, these are all things that have been on our radar, so a lot of this is not a surprise.
Yeah.
But I wanted to hear from you all and hear your thoughts behind it. As far as emergency management, Kelly and I have been doing a little bit of research already, trying to figure out, you know, what do other municipalities do? What would most people outsource the continuity of operations plan? You know, what would that cost to have somebody do that for us? You know, there's different pieces that we are gleaning from other municipalities that we can put together pretty quickly, but you know, there's other pieces that we'll be asking for some budget funds for. in order
They
to
did say
accomplish.
that there were templates and, you know,
Laramie County.
Laramie County had templates and.
Yep,
all sorts of
so
stuff,
yeah, like the emergency operations plan, after the, you know, tabletop exercise, I've had some calls with vendors that do this kind of work. That's, the EOP is easier to create in a way,
Mhm.
but it's the COOP, the continuity
Right,
of
right,
Robert,
yeah.
that is like,
Personal
this system
based.
goes down, what's next, what's next, what's
Right,
next?
yeah.
And that is more of like a 8 to 12 month process.
Yeah.
Where the other one's like, sure, we can use boilerplate template,
Yeah.
kind of develop it. But the staff being lean that we are, it's kind of difficult to find time, so it's like, what will we drop? And then that's kind of guidance, if that's something the board says do in-house, then we will need to say to you, what do you want us to drop?
Yeah.
So, right now, unless that's a budget request, and we'll probably put it in to the budget request for next year of like to
Yeah.
outsource stuff, but still outsourcing is a ton of work
Yeah.
as well.
Right.
And we're in the year of we are going to be asking the community, so I think a strategy overall to think about over this next 18 months is like, so we don't want fatigue of our people. We're gonna be asking them a lot, like, you know, with the Postmaster plan and a lot, so that's okay, and a lot of communities do that. But we do need to think that we're in asking mode big time, and we don't want, and I hear what you're saying about the branding, we don't want a lot of these things to conflict either.
Right.
Of like, they're creating
Yeah.
this brand here, or maybe the guidance from the board is like, we don't need a specific brand for each one of those, it's just like, come show up to we just call it what it, transportation master plan thing, you know, maybe it's just as like very clear language. But I do see, there's kind of like this, bubbling and boiling of just a lot going on, which is very exciting, so it's like, how do we keep people that they're not like, again? You know, can I just enjoy the Main Street Market tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to go to
So
all
I
the
think
booths
there's-
and
we
put
have to chat
stickies
about
up.
strategy too, and we'll
Yeah.
figure that out together.
Yeah.
But we do have a lot on our plate and a lot ahead for this community too, which is incredibly exciting.
And I know one of the things that wasn't brought up tonight, but it's on our forefront too, is access off the interstate.
Oh, yeah.
And that's gotta be
Always.
very high on that.
Yeah,
And also to not just focus on one, but focus on two.
Yeah, we need a secondary.
Right. And I know with the new addition that we're talking about south of town, they were talking about, what is that?
58.
58, so.
Great place for an off-ramp.
Yes, it is. It would be
Right.
perfect. We need that so that we can make any improvements on it. Yeah, off of Cleveland.
Right.
So CDOT is.
I didn't say that fence has been down for a while there. People, still utilize that access.
Can I go back to the emergency thing for a second? I hear what you're saying, totally. And I think we all understand, you know, if we're asking for something out of the scope of what is already in the plan, then something's gonna get dropped. Is the emergency plan in its entirety something that could be phased? Right? Like, I mean, that's kind of what I hear you saying anyway, but I wouldn't wanna drop like a communication protocol, for instance, like that feels to me like something that could happen. And then an overall, like, a
I hear what you're saying.
basic emergency plan
Yeah,
while we wait to be able to do this other thing.
my
Build the box.
understanding is that, yeah, like the little research that I've done so far, just trying to talk to different vendors, is that emergency operation plan is kind of what you do in a disaster. The COOP is how you do it, and those two are married. They go hand in hand. So
Sure.
And so I think, but there, I mean, certainly communities take steps that say, well, we're just gonna start with this and then go to that. But in light of just the next 18 months of the plan, I mean, we'll figure it out, but it, you know, I think that could be a budget ask of like, we do need a consultant to
Yeah, for sure.
assist with that.
I feel like that's kind of where it was headed. It was like someone come in, take inventory and all the things and
Yeah.
then craft it.
Yeah, because if we're doing that, if we're doing home rule, if we're doing, you know,
Yeah.
so that's, and you know. We are a strong and mighty team and we'll figure things out, you know,
Always.
um,
And that's part of this process of just hearing from you, and then, you know, we'll take a look at it and provide you some input as far as, you know, what we think that we're capable of accomplishing in the time period, and then we can talk about what those budget asks might be and things like that. So we will not, we are kind of, we have some items to do dot exercise and things like that, but I think that, then the items that were presented are, there's like 6 that we can group together. So I feel pretty comfortable with us kind of coming back with some other ideas for you. Yes,
another
trustee
thing.
Toots.
So I have a question related to that. So we did, correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of an MOU with the emergency response.
With, we did it with Wellington Fire Protection District.
Well, not only that, but
Yes,
where we met.
yes.
So,
Yes, we do
yes.
have that.
So do we not have any, because I know one of those discussions was they were going to assist or start with the plans. Have we not done that from
Yes,
2
so
years
that is-
ago?
So what some municipalities have done is, they take that MOU and that's their emergency operations plan.
Okay,
And then that's what they have, that they refer, this, what I saw was Douglas County. So like Castle Pines and some of those smaller communities up in Douglas County, they refer to that as their emergency operations plan. But it doesn't cover their continuity of operations plan, which is a separate document and a separate plan.
Got
So yes, we are covered. I mean, we have the MOU with the county. It's been signed. It was approved by the Board of Trustees.
because they'll
They
come in and assist and
Yes.
that's what I thought. I was
Yes.
like, wait a minute, we were just told that we had this
Yes.
support like
Yes,
2
we
years
do,
ago.
we
Okay,
do, but
perfect.
how do we get there? You know, and so that's part of the process.
Got it.
The question is, what happens if a tornado takes out our water treatment plant?
Well, that they
Yeah,
were
and
to
that's-
step in and assist.
Okay, how do we continue to deliver water?
I'm sorry, what? I can't.
Sorry. If a tornado takes out a critical facility, water treatment plant, for example. The continuity of operations plan is how do we continue to provide water, not only to our residents, but also for fire protection and everything else.
Correct.
So that's a big question to ask. What if it takes out our public works facility over here, you know, a fire runs through town and we lose ice-stone and we lose the public works facility and we lose, you know, hundreds of homes, you know.
Right.
I mean, these are life-threatening kind of actions, and you need to have that plan, that continuity plan. You need to have
Yeah.
your first responders, police and fire, they're gonna take the lead on responding to that event. It's gonna be up to the town to come up and say, okay, how can we supply that? Do we have generators that we can supply? Do we have lights? How do we get potable water? You know, Patty has, I'm sorry, Minister. Garcia, by statute has emergency authority
Mhm.
to spend money, you know, to respond to an emergency, and this board will be hand in hand when they're doing that. So I agree, we need to be thinking about these. kind of things.
We'll put it together, a resolution
Yeah.
for emergency management, things like that. So there's different pieces we can get to that are probably pretty quick. But then there's the other pieces that will be very staff intensive and will take some time.
Got it. And I'll stipulate, I asked those same questions 2 years ago.
Good.
And that's how I had found out that we had a lot of those supports in place when we agreed to operating under this MOU. Was that there was additional resources for water, there was additional resources for the generator supports from other areas. So I had asked all these same questions, which is why I was just trying to understand
Yeah.
where we were moving from here, is because we were told we had this support and this stuff 2 years ago when we agreed to the MOU. So that's what I was just trying to figure out was where it was going from here. I'm not against any of the emergency planning. I'm just trying to understand where it's moving from compared to where it was when we agreed to that agreement.
And I will send you all that MOU here shortly, either tonight or tomorrow morning, if I can find it, but yes.
And one quick thing too on the emergency stuff and situation, kind of like what's happening out in California
Mhm.
right now. What is, I think, a Palisade, the big fire,
Mhm.
and how long's that been now?
Oh, yeah. There's-
4 permits have been issued.
there's
We
no-
gotta figure out a way, you know, I don't know if we can do that, but to streamline things in that situation.
Well, that's toxic cleanup.
You know what's interesting about that comment is in the tabletop exercise that we did, the major person who would be involved in doing that and letting people know if they can go back in their homes or not, Kelly Dykstra. His house was lost in that fire.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so when talking about continuity, in
Mhm.
this specific incident we had, you know, they ran their thing without knowing that it was right next to Kelly's house. He would have lost his entire property.
Mm.
And he is the person who would be coordinating those things
Yes.
and he's like an essential person for that. So like Kelly's not available. Now what? You know, like
Right.
that's a big deal. That's a major job for one person. So, I mean, there's other people, of course, but he's the guy. So that is a good example of exactly why we need this plan. I do have another thing regarding economic development. Colorado Downtown Inc. is talking about activating, or infill in general. There is opportunity, of course, because there's an inventory happening on Main Street as to what properties, what's going on at what properties and, you know, stats and those kind of things. To take that one step further, the way that they were activating these properties and improving and increasing property tax. So let's think of it from that perspective. As part of the inventory of properties that were available, they also deemed what the problems were with those properties. Did, you know, people consider a property, but it needed soil testing, so they're just like pass, right? What the scenario was with some of the challenge communities is the municipality undertook the testing necessary, and in some cases even took out insurance policies on properties based on those risks in order for those properties to develop. And I don't know what would be necessary for each property. It's a property by property situation. If there's soil testing needed, if it has to reach certain thresholds, it's important for us to know that maybe this property as is with the soil as tested would be okay for this use as is right now, but not for a restaurant. And we would know that. So then when we're marketing those properties from the perspective of a business developer, we know what goes with what. And we've already invested in that property in a sense of we're ready to match that property with the developer. This is a very case-by-case scenario and does require investment into private property, but for the purpose of improving and increasing property tax dollars and increasing infill of lots that are killing our downtown and make us look like a ghost town.
And sales tax.
And sales tax, absolutely. So that is a very extensive project. I saw scenarios in 3 communities and major properties that ended up being in huge developments that were, like these are Denver communities, some of them were. But this was an investment by a municipality for economic development. So not just like, hey, look at us, please come here, but like, let me tell you how to make this work. And that hand holding potentially in this climate is maybe the next level step of making people consider Wilmington. So between telling them if they would or would not be successful based on the use of the property and prepping and priming a property so that they know that that use would be fine without a million things to do or tests to do or risks to take. That was a way to do it. So each property may or may not have different challenges that may or may not require investment in order to. And whether or not that's worth it, I don't even know for that specific property, but I just want to throw that out there as a technique that Colorado Downtown Inc. was talking about with specific challenges that were successful. And made a huge difference in those communities.
I think that would be a huge thing with your DDA.
All economic development is about reducing risk,
Right,
reducing risk to the developer.
right.
We've had a discussion before about DDAs. DDAs are a self-generating form of revenue. If we're using TIF. TIF funds can make improvements like soil testing. They can buy properties. They can rebate property and sales taxes to cover gaps.
Yeah.
You know, that's the power of TIF, and we definitely need it.
Yeah, and doing all that with a DDA in place already is like double dipping on those increased property dollars for that. But, yeah, in this case, it was municipalities who had made these investments. And the one that was really curious to me was the taking out insurance policy on property for a specific amount of years that would make sure that that developer knew that whatever concerns or questions of that property would absolutely never hit them. So that's a very specific example.
Yeah.
But I just, like, these are the kind of things that are policy, right? Like, are we going to allow this to happen or not? Are we encouraging these opportunities or not? And so I just want to lay that down there and say, I learned a lot of this and really specific examples, but I think there is creative solutions to get people to invest in our town and to make us money.
Sure.
I'd be interested if anyone has like free time to see, like an exercise, taking one or two of the vacant properties downtown and doing like an ROI on best guess scenario, right? Like, I think this is a very interesting, I can't think of the word now. It's an interesting avenue to take. But it sounds expensive to me,
I
but
don't know, maybe
but it
you don't
could
know.
absolutely pay for itself
Yeah.
in like a couple of years. So I don't know. It's
And
interesting.
There's ways to do that. When I was in Fulton, Illinois, we had a TIF that had been sitting dormant for like 12 years, but there were still funds in the TIF fund. And meanwhile, there was an industrial site that had been leveled, but it was all broken up. Concrete, 6 foot thick concrete. This was a big metal processing place. We used the TIF funds to assist with the cleanup,
Right.
and we worked with the developer to bring in a 40-unit section 42 housing, low income housing there,
Mhm,
because that was a priority for the town.
mhm.
It worked beautifully,
And
Well,
no
TIF,
developer touched
DDA
it.
and CDBG.
and it didn't take money out of the general fund or the city coffee, because it came directly out of DDA. It wasn't TIF.
And I think that's my goal kind of going with this is if we're, I guess like we need to define if we are a board that still says development needs to pay their own way. Cause a lot of the suggestions being made sound like it's not being suggested that way anymore. So that's what I'm trying to figure out is does development pay its own way or does it not?
Can I answer that?
Yes.
If we don't have the tools in place, like home rule, like tax increment financing, the policy generally says development's gonna pay its own way because we're not gonna take our tax dollars. Number one, you're probably restricted from doing that,
Mhm.
to take people's tax dollars and giving it to a business.
Mhm.
You know, that's a lawsuit. So, you know, there's tools out there to use, and I think, you know, we've explored some of them, we've talked about some of them. It's about getting serious about it. And getting beyond the discussion stage and saying, okay, what's the best course of action? Demnant, but a urban renewal authority
Mhm.
almost in their entire town, which was pretty small at the time.
Mhm.
They built Walmart, Costco, you know, all these things, and now they got revenue coming in like crazy.
Mhm.
They were not a home rule, but they had an urban renewal authority,
Mhm.
which gave them authority to work and use those kind of funds.
Mhm.
And, you know, yeah, the deal sometimes, I think I did one deal using TIF funds. We put a 50,000 square foot shopping retail place. There was 12 years left on this TIF and you couldn't renew it.
Mhm.
So I said, the deal was we would share back 50% of your property taxes and 50% of your sales taxes for the next 5 years.
Mhm.
And then it drops to 25% for the next 5 years after that. And then that was the end of it. He built the shop. You know,
That's what brought Shields to Johnstown.
Mhm.
Yeah, one thing you're thinking, you know, on residential, yeah, they need to pay their own way. Okay, so when you start looking at commercial, you've got so many different avenues, you've got sales tax coming in. And I mean,
Places for
and,
people to
yeah,
work.
people
live
to
and-
work,
live
and
and
then
work.
you got the what they're generating, what they're spending for other places. So I mean, on businesses, I think it's a win-win situation most of the time, as long as we do it like through an enterprise zone or a DDA.
But it's nice to know, cause there's your answer to if you can do it, start anything moving forward before that goes into place. Cause you said they were statutory when they did the urban development, correct?
You are.
Urban renewal.
Urban,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
a,
Yep, and that, I mean, access to a lot of different funds, right?
A
so
lot of,
Yep,
there's one of your answers for moving forward even
there's a
before
lot
your
of ways to
transition.
skin that cat.
yeah. That's so nasty.
That's an expression.
Yeah.
I know, it's full of expression.
I'm used to that expression. I ain't southern. Okay. There you go. Do we have anything further for dreams?
I just wanna say thank you, Patty, for planning this, and it's the board a chance to. You know, all the things that we've talked about, with the strategic plan, and it gives you and it gives staff an idea of, you know, what's important to us. You know, we'll work on policy, we'll work on all these other things like that. But these are some big items here, but it's not a list that's long.
No, it's not, and I appreciate that ever so much. So like I said, we'll take your thoughts back. We may have to follow up with you. We've all kept track of what different people said, so if we need more clarification or anything like that on ideas, then we'll reach out to individuals to figure that out. And as Kelly mentioned, we are a small but mighty team. So again, we'll look at it as far as the budget opportunities as well as, you know, staffing capabilities as well as time involved in putting together some of these things. So, but we'll come back to you with some ideas and thoughts, maybe another work session, or I'll just send it out by email and we can talk when we have our one-on-ones or something like that, but I'll come up with a plan here shortly. Thanks, you guys. This was really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a wrap, folks. That's a wrap.